Japan imports 99.7% of its oil, 97.7% of its gas, 99.6% of its coal. Without these resources, the world's fourth largest economy collapses in weeks. And there's only one country that can keep the lights on. It's not America. It's not China. It's Australia. And Beijing just figured out the choke point. Right now, as you watch this video, Japanese steel mills are consuming Australian coal at a rate of 70 million tons per year. Japanese power plants are burning Australian LNG worth $20.6 billion annually. Australian iron, or $5.6 billion worth, is being transformed into everything from Toyota cars to Mitsubishi air conditioners. But here's what nobody's talking about. Japan doesn't have a backup plan, and China is watching every single shipment. In December 2025, Japan and Australia signed something that sent shockwaves through Beijing. A framework for strategic defense coordination. Not a trade deal, a defense framework. Why would two countries with a 70-year trade relationship suddenly need military coordination? Because the South China Sea, the water highway between Australia and Japan, carries 64% of China's maritime trade and 42% of Japan's. One blockade, that's all it would take. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, you need to understand just how dependent Japan really is. Let me paint you a picture of vulnerability. Japan's energy self-sufficiency rate, 12.1%. That means 88% of everything powering their economy comes from overseas. Compare that to the United States at 105% energy self-sufficient, or even China at 80%. Japan is the most energy vulnerable major economy on Earth. Now here's where Australia enters the picture. Australia supplies 34% of Japan's total energy imports. Let me repeat that. One country provides more than 1/3 of Japan's energy. America, despite being Japan's closest military ally, only 7.4% of Japan's imports come from the US. And most of that isn't even energy, it's machinery, aircraft, and pharmaceuticals. Now let's talk about what keeps Japanese politicians awake at night. China. In November 2025, tensions between Japan and China hit a breaking point when Japan's Prime Minister declared that a Chinese attack on Taiwan could be an existential crisis for Japan. China's response? Economic warfare, travel bans affecting 500,000 tourists, rare earth export restrictions, coordinated campaigns targeting Japanese businesses. But here's the real weapon. Every single ton of Australian coal and iron or sailing to Japan passes through waters China claims as its own. There are only 7 major maritime choke points in the world. The Strait of Malacca, the Suez Canal, the Strait of Hormuz. Control one of these, and you control global trade. China doesn't need to invade Australia or Japan. They just need to control the water between them. And they're building the Navy to do exactly that. But Japan has a counter-strategy, and it's brilliant. Here's why Australia is irreplaceable. First, geographic proximity. Shipping coal from Australia to Japan takes 7 to 10 days. From America, 21 days minimum. 3 times longer, 3 times more expensive. Every day at sea is money lost, emissions released, and vulnerability to disruption. Second, scale and reliability. In 2023, Australia exported $35.4 billion worth of coal to Japan, 41% of total exports to Japan. Australia is Japan's number 1 source of coal, number 2 source of iron ore, number 1 source of LNG, number 1 source of aluminum. America can't match those numbers, not even close. Third, the trust factor. Australia and Japan have been trading partners for 70 years. After the 1970s oil shocks, when Middle Eastern suppliers weaponized energy, Japan learned a brutal lesson. Diversify suppliers, prioritize stable democracies. Australia became Japan's insurance policy. But here's where it gets really interesting. The partnership is evolving beyond fossil fuels. In August 2025, Australia selected Japanese Mogami-class frigates for its navy, $7 billion worth of defense equipment. In December 2025, they launched a framework for strategic defense coordination, meaning joint military planning. And in the energy sector, both countries are now investing in green iron production. What's green iron? Instead of burning coal to make steel, you use hydrogen produced from renewable energy. Australia has abundant renewable resources, solar and wind potential worth trillions. Japan has advanced manufacturing technology. Together, they're building a $24 billion green iron industry that would cut Japan's energy consumption by 11%, reduce Japan's emissions by 14%, create a climate-friendly supply chain that doesn't depend on Chinese or American cooperation. This isn't just trade. This is strategic survival. But there's a cost nobody's talking about. Japan's current decarbonization strategy relies on carbon capture technology and ammonia co-firing. The problem? These technologies are catastrophically expensive. Carbon capture has a history of underperformance and unmet expectations. That's according to the International Energy Agency, not some environmental group. Ammonia co-firing would cost Japan $41 billion per year at current prices. For comparison, importing finished green iron from Australia would be cheaper and cut more emission. So why is Japan even considering the expensive route? Politics. Japan's steel industry employs hundreds of thousands of workers. Admitting you need to offshore iron making to Australia is political suicide, unless you frame it as strategic energy security. Now let's connect the dots on why China is paying attention. China isn't threatened by Australia-Japan trade. China is threatened by Australia-Japan defense coordination. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. If war breaks out over Taiwan, Japan's entire resource lifeline gets cut. Unless Australia and Japan have a military plan to keep those shipping lanes open. That's exactly what the December 2025 defense framework is about. Joint naval exercises, intelligence sharing, coordinated missile defense. In November 2025, China's escalating confrontation with Japan collided directly with China's attempt to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement. Australia, as a member nation, has the power to veto China's entry, and Japan has made it clear they oppose China joining. The message is unmistakable. If you threaten our energy security, we'll block your trade ambitions. But China has its own leverage. China is Australia's largest trading partner, $188.7 billion in 2024. China is Japan's largest trading partner, even larger. China could crash both economies with targeted sanctions. Unless Australia and Japan build an economic relationship so integrated, so militarily coordinated, that China can't afford to disrupt it without triggering a broader crisis. That's the strategy. It's not about choosing America over China. It's about making Australia-Japan relations too critical to mess with. So where does America fit into all this? Isn't Japan a U.S. ally? Don't they have mutual defense treaties? Yes, but America can't mine coal for Japan, can't drill LNG for Japan, can't ship iron or at competitive prices. Military protection? Absolutely. Economic lifeline? That's Australia's job. And here's the kicker. America is now energy independent. They don't need to import resources. They export them, which means America's strategic priority isn't securing shipping lanes for resource trade. It's containing China militarily. Japan needs both, and only a US-Australia-Japan triangle provides both. So here's what happens next. Scenario 1. The alliance holds. Australia continues supplying resources. Japan continues buying them. The green iron industry takes off, creating $24 billion in new trade. Defense coordination deepens. Australia gets Japanese military technology. Japan gets secure shipping routes. China sees the alliance is unbreakable and focuses on economic competition instead of military coercion. Scenario 2. The chokepoint activates. A crisis erupts over Taiwan. China blockades the South China Sea. Japanese factories run out of coal in weeks. Power plants shut down. Steel mills go dark. The world's fourth largest economy grinds to a halt. And America's military might? Useless against an economic stranglehold. Which scenario plays out depends entirely on one thing: whether Australia and Japan can build their partnership faster than China can build leverage to disrupt it. Here's what you need to understand. The most important alliances aren't always the loudest ones. Everyone focuses on US-Japan relations because of military bases and security treaties. But the Australia-Japan partnership is what actually keeps the Japanese economy running. 34% of Japan's energy, 41% of its coal imports, billions in iron, ore, and LNG. No Australia? No modern Japan. It's that simple, and China knows it. That's why a tiny change in shipping routes or naval blockades could reshape the entire Pacific. That's why a green iron industry in Australia could redefine Japanese energy security. That's why a defense coordination framework signed in December 2025 might be the most important agreement you never heard about. The next time you hear about US-China tensions or Japan's military spending, remember, the real power isn't in aircraft carriers. It's in coal ships, and Australia controls the supply. So what do you think? Is Australia the most underrated superpower in the Pacific? Could the green iron revolution change everything? And what happens if China blockades the South China Sea? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm reading all of them. If you made it this far, you're exactly the kind of viewer who appreciates deep geopolitical analysis. Subscribe for more content like this, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Next video, we're breaking down China's rare earth monopoly and how it's weaponizing the tech supply chain. You won't want to miss it. See you there.